Hello sax players! Today we're going to talk about a little bit more finesse when it comes to our piece, work on some exercises, as well as review what we've talked about before. So first we're going to talk about why we're doing the piece this way. I want to make sure that you know this is my approach to learning a piece personally, and it's the way I like to teach it as well. I like to chip away at the large piece first, just get the whole thing down, get the notes on the paper, know how the whole piece kind of works from a wider lens, and then I like to dig into specific areas. Different teachers have different strategies for this. I like that because I find it a little more satisfying and immediately gratifying to know what the whole piece sounds like and kind of play it okay, and then learn how to play each section with more and more finesse, because it allows me to learn how each section fits into the larger puzzle, rather than build a tiny perfect little section before I know how the end sounds. It's like a sculptor with marble. Michelangelo designing this David out of marble. Sculptors carve out of a large piece of rock and they first get it close to a human shape and then work on the fine details. They don't just take a huge brick of marble and then carve out the hand perfectly first and then deal with the rest later, right? So, we will get to this. We are going to again work on measure 3 to 33, but talk a little bit more about specific techniques and fingerings, because there is an alternate fingering that we have to talk about. But first, we are going to warm up. So, you know how this works. Pull the metronome out. 80 beats per minute. Make sure your volume is up. 8 beats per note, full octave, starting on G. 1, 2, ready. So there's your first 8 notes up. Before you pause me and go back and do that a couple times, I want to also point out that some people who are recording the video are actually only recording 7 beats, because how you're hearing it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, off. And that's not it. So it should be do. The end of the 8th beat, technically the 9th click, is where you release. It's like if you were walking through a door and you open the door and stepped right where the door used to be. You haven't walked through the door. You haven't finished entering. If you stop at the end of the 7th beat, where the 8th click is, then you haven't played the 8th beat. You just ended at the 8th beat. So what I'm hearing people do is do. Where it should be do. Off on the 9th beat. That's an 8-beat play. So this is going to also apply to how we play our piece. One exercise, this is actually 70 beats per minute, so doing it a little bit slower actually makes us use more air to do it. I'm going to slow it down to 60. And we're going to talk about an exercise that some of us have done before, but some of us who are new might not have. And it's our do, re, mi, re, do exercise. So it's do, re, do, re, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, all the way up to the top. So I'm going to play it, watch me do it once, and join me the second time. All on our G scale still. 1, 2, 3. So that exercise is a half note on do. So do, re, do, re, mi, re, do. So there's always a rest point at do. So a 2-beat note at do, and then quarter notes to wherever you last were, plus a note back down. We'll only do it up this week. If you remember how to play it top to bottom, then you can also practice that this week. Do it with the metronome at 60. Make sure your tone is good and make sure those notes are connected. Make sure you're breathing in appropriate spaces. I try to only breathe after I play the low bottom do for 2 beats every time, just a phrase, and make sure your phrasing is consistent. If you want to practice short staccato notes, you can do that, but be intentional. It can be focus on pitch quality. This piece we're playing has a lot of tenuto, a lot of long legato notes, so focus on that for now. You can also, if you start to get bored, integrate other dynamics and articulations into it. Play it as quietly as you can, play it as strongly as you can. So, pause me, go do that a couple times, join me when you are ready. We're going to make sure we are in tune because we're playing with a recording. Our instrument is an E-flat instrument, so I'm going to set it to it and so we're right in a normal range. If you were tuned to me, you'll be fine. Let's look at the first 33 measures again. Last time we played this, we focused on just getting the notes down. We talked a little bit about phrasing, but I wanted to point out today that we are working towards phrasing perfection now, which means not breathing where there is no breath mark. If you look at end of measure 6, there's a breath mark. End of measure 10, there is a breath mark. End of 14, end of 18, end of 22, and then of course this big block rest you are allowed to breathe. Those are the only places you're allowed to breathe from now on. You've got the notes. You should have the notes at this point. We need to focus on tone and making sure that these phrases connected. So measure 3 is going to sound like I am still articulating right where it says no breath mark, but in between phrases at measure 5, at measure 9, at measure 13. I'm still articulating there. I'm using my tongue to separate the phrases, but I am not breathing. The tongue gives it a little bit of space. Breathing gives it too much space. One other thing we need to talk about is your alternate fingering for that C. So when you go from measure 3, it is much easier because C and B always play next to each other in this piece, almost always. So when you play C, instead of playing it with only your middle finger in your left hand, like you're probably used to, play your B, and then on your side of your instrument where you have these 3 keys, all right? These 3 right here, the middle key is also a C. So if you play just like you play the B, but then add this middle of 3 keys, it's a C. So pause me, make sure you've found that key and you're comfortable with it. It allows you to play a lot more smoothly. I'll play it with the normal fingering first. You have to articulate a lot more then. It's a lot easier to play it that way because you don't have to flip between just your first finger and just your middle finger. This can get really messy. So I'm going to pull up the piece and we are going to play from measure 3 to measure 33. Pay attention to your phrasing, only breathe where there are breath marks, tongue lightly between them, and think about, are you the most important thing happening at this very moment melodically in the piece? If you don't think you're the most important thing happening at that part of the piece, back off. Listen to what else is happening around you. I'll turn it up so we can do that. And off we go. So, in replaying that, things I notice about my own playing. This section right here, at measure 17, is the only section, in my opinion, where it is easier to play with the traditional C fingering. And even then, it might not be, right? So practice it both ways. Or it's going to feel different for everyone. I actually end up back on the alternate fingering with the right hand on the side anyways. So for me, that's an adjustment I'm going to make. I also notice I am one of the only things happening at measure 3, so you are melody. You're with clarinets. So when you play, you had better also be able to match the clarinets, what they are doing both texturally and dynamically. You should not be louder than the clarinets. You should be right on board with them. I also notice at 11, I become harmony. You are paired with clarinet 1. So you need to be listening to clarinet 1. And because you're a harmony line, you also need to be able to hear clarinet 2, which is playing the same thing that you played at the beginning. At 19, I become background. I'm a pad, a chord pad, which just means you're supporting low brass. They have melody. They have the same part that you played at the beginning, but just lower and more booming. So you need to support them, which means get out the way. You need to step out of their way sonically so they can have the stage. Trust me, low brass players wait their entire lives to have the melody. Let them have it when they have it. Don't try to overpower them, outshine them. So even though it doesn't say it, that's a piano section. You just know by hearing it. And then lastly, that last C has to be very delicate. And because it's an isolated note, I play that one with the original fingering, with just the middle finger in the left hand, because that's an easier note to start and be guaranteed, because you only have one finger to worry about if you play it that way. You have your first finger in your right hand and your middle finger in your left hand to worry about if you play it the other way. So those are just a few observations I made coming in. Where I've improved this week, I have improved being able to phrase and articulate very smoothly in these phrases. I've been able to improve my lung capacity so that I can play these longer phrases, and I've been able to get better at actually fitting into the rhythm and not rushing, which for saxophone, which is one of my weaker instruments, is something I work on. What I would like you to do this week is re-record measures 3 through 33 with the recording this time. It's about 80 beats per minute. It's almost exactly 80 beats per minute. Re-record measures 3 to 33, and in between 30 seconds and a minute, no less than 30 seconds, no more than a minute, I would like you to explain to me what you practiced, how you got better, what elements of this stood out to you as things you needed to work on, and what things do you need to continue to work on to make this section perfect. It's going to be a long process, but I want to make sure we can bounce between parts of the piece. How are you approaching 3 to 33 differently this week with what you've learned? And also, how are you approaching it differently based on how you know the rest of the piece sounds and how the recording is? So go and listen to the recording a bunch, play with it a bunch, even go and watch my video tutorials for other instruments. Like maybe you want to watch clarinet to see how it fits in. Then submit that as one video to me with the recording and the 30 seconds to a minute breakdown of how you are working, and email me if you have any questions. I will talk to you next time we Zoom.